Hi, my name is Deb from DG Reads, and this is my furry scarecrow Kylie, and we're here today to launch my vlog for TBR Harvest. If you're not familiar with TBR Harvest, it is a really fun readathon brought to us by Leandra at Leandra the TBR Zero, and it is for the full month of October, and there are multiple ways to play. She's put a lot of creativity into this to allow you to kind of make it what you want, and I have elected to play the Escape the Corn Maze, so I will be rolling a d6 dice and picking prompts as I go, and once I read a book, I'll come back and roll again. So if you saw my TBR, you will have seen my first roll, and that was a 1. I did not get very far, but my prompt was to read a book over 400 pages, and normally that's super easy. Normally I have things on my TBR already that are over 400 pages, over 500 pages. This month I don't, and horror I don't tend to read as many long ones, but I found the perfect book because I will be reading Revival by Stephen King. This is 401 page, so tailor-made for this prompt, and it fits exactly what I want going into spooky season. I want to get to books on my shelves. I am also participating in Owned October, and this certainly works for that as well. Owned October is a challenge brought to us by Tree Reads over on Instagram, and it's basically the idea is to read books you already own. And there's a bingo board. This will at least work for one, if not more than one prompt on that bingo board, and I'm going to be throwing that challenge in with anything else that I can this month and hitting my shelves as much as I possibly can. All I really know about this one going into it is that it is following a boy growing up into a man. I think we're following him over many, many years, and his interactions with a reverend. This reverend has a tragedy, something goes wrong in his life, and he begins kind of cursing God, cursing religion, and going a very different type of way. So I don't know much about this one. I don't hear a ton about it, quite frankly, but it is one of the very few novels by Stephen King that I have not picked up yet. So I'm excited to get to it, and I'll be back once I have some thoughts, and hopefully I can finish it pretty quickly. His books tend to work well for me on audio, and I tend to fly through them pretty quickly. So hopefully that's the case here, and we can get moving on our board further past that first spot on the board. Okay, I am now close to halfway into Revival by Stephen King, and I'm not feeling like this is going to be a new favorite. It's definitely very slow in not an untypical King type of way, but it's also not something that's making me think like I would put it down. I am intrigued to see where it's heading. There's been a lot of setup to this point, which again is not, I think, atypical for a Stephen King book. We're following a young man who starts as a young boy at the beginning of the book. I think he's around 8 years old. He befriends the new pastor, the new reverend in town, and it's a very much typical Christian Methodist religious pastor until this pastor goes through a severe trauma in his life and he goes off the rails. He gets kicked out of the church and has a kind of goodbye moment with this young boy and says our paths will probably cross again, never say never. And of course their paths are going to cross because they're both significant characters in the book. So I'm not sure what the end all be all of this is. The Reverend has a interest in electricity and the power of electricity and experimenting with electricity. We see him playing around with it when this narrator is a young boy and showing this off. He uses it or attempts to use it kind of in a medical capacity. And in the present of where I am in the story currently, he's using electricity as almost like a snake oil salesman at a festival, carnival type of thing to sell photos created with electricity. And we're kind of heading towards what the title is implying at the point where I am now, where we're heading into like an old tent revival type of thing, a healing type thing. And how much this electricity really is helping people, how much it's all a sham, how much of it is potentially some supernatural stuff going on, I'm not sure at this point. I'm very intrigued to see where it is is going. And I got through the first half of this pretty quickly. It's not super long as far as Stephen King books goes. This was the book that, of course, I picked for my over 400 pages, and it was 401 pages. So I think so far it's going pretty well. It is October 1st today, and I'm already halfway into the book, so I'm not going to complain too much. So I'll be back once I have final thoughts on this one and I'm ready for a new roll. Alrighty, I am back because I have finished Revival, which means I need to give you some updates on my thoughts on this one, and then also that we get to roll the dice again. And Jingly Kylie is a little excited because I just got home from work, so you may hear a lot of extra jingling at the moment, but that's okay. It is what it is. This one is a book that really took everything that happened in the beginning and really kept building on it. Some of the things in the beginning that didn't necessarily feel necessary or felt like extra moments or extra information wind up tying in at the end, and I thought that was really well done. The ending in this one builds to chaos in a fun way, mind you, and I thought it really came to a good conclusion. Stephen King is not always known for wrapping up books in the best way. Sometimes his endings can kind of go past the point where they could end, and this one I think ended perfectly. It still did feel slow for a lot of it at the beginning, so I can't discount that just because I really enjoyed the ending. So this one winds up being more of a 3.5 verging on 4, but I'm still really glad I read it. I'm still really glad and also a little sad to have finished one of the last currently published Stephen King's possible. So I had a good time with this one. It worked really well for this with the 401 page. It worked really well for Owned October, which I'm also doing because I needed a book that has been on my TBR for ages, and this one certainly has, and I'm glad to check it off. So with that, we do get to roll again, and maybe this time we'll get more than a 1. Okay, so we're on square one, and I have my cute little dog toy dice here. I don't want to squeak it, so then Kylie will come investigate, but let's see what it gives us. Hopefully not a 1. 5. I can work with a 5. 1, 2. C, A, and T in the title. And that gets me a cat. And I think if I can also make it a mostly black cover, then I'd get 2 cats. I know I said in my TBR I didn't necessarily need to get all the cats, but we'll see. Alright, so we did better with our roll this time and got to a decent amount of progress on the board, and the spot that I landed on actually even gets me one of the black cats. So, Kylie's growling about the cats apparently. The prompt that I landed on was a title needs to have C, A, and T in it, and if I wanted to pick up that other black cat I passed, I need a mostly black cover. So, this was harder than I thought it would be. C seems to be a lacking letter in my horror books, and when I did find that, there was no T. Like every title has a T in it, but no, not the ones I was finding. So I found a couple that wouldn't work for black cover, but I finally found something that would work. It wasn't one I initially thought of as being a horror book that I would lean toward for spooky season, but I think there's enough horrific stuff in it that it'll work. And that is The Practice, The Horizon, and The Chain by Sophia Samatar, and this was a gifted copy I received from Tord. It says, the boy was raised as one of the chained, condemned to toil in the bowels of a mining ship out among the stars. It sounds like this boy is picked to go upstairs to where the well-to-do are being educated and be educated alongside him. He befriends someone he knows as the professor. This person is someone else who is descended from the chained and treated as less than. So I think this is not horror, it's sci-fi, but it sounds like there's some horrific themes going on in here, if nothing else. And it's really short, so I'll be able to roll again before too long. So this is what I'm gonna go for and pick up 2 cats along the way, and I'll be back relatively soon, I think, after I finish this one. All right, I have made some progress on my Corn Maze book because I've actually finished my Corn Maze book, and that was The Practice, The Horizon, and The Chain by Sophia Samatar, and I'm not sure what I just read. I have such conflicted feelings about this. I think a lot of the writing was good. I think it had a lot of really interesting concepts. We've got a young boy who has been one of the chained his entire life, very brutally they have a chain attached to them, and as they grow it has to be removed and replaced. They're connected to their fellow workers, and they live in very difficult circumstances. It's cold, there's no furniture really, there's just each other. And then he starts doing drawings, and this gets attention, and he's elected as the person they're going to bring up as part of a scholarship program to the upper decks, where they get educated, where they see the world as much as there is a world on this ship. The people upstairs have a blue ring light attached to their leg, but conceptually they are free, but also not so much. So there's a lot of interesting discussions about freedom. What is freedom? What's being in chains? What's being a slave? How to exercise kind of rights and freedoms and all of that. But I feel like it wasn't long enough to accomplish a whole lot with that, and I got lost in where we were going and what was happening. I have a lot of unanswered questions with it. In the end, I'm giving it 3 stars, I think. My ratings for this kind of fluctuated throughout the book in terms of what I was thinking it was going to be. So I don't know. I'm glad I read it, glad I gave it a shot, but I'm also glad to be moving on. Although, well, you'll see the roll. It didn't so much go according to plan. I rolled a 2, which meant I landed on the spot that sent me back 3 spaces. So, not the best. But the spot I landed on was spooky book, and that's always good for this time of year. So spooky leaves me a lot of options, but I think what I want to do is pick up an audio arc that I have, and that is for Run by Blake Crouch. And this is a book that I think he originally self-published, but it's now been picked up traditionally. I have the audio arc from PRH Audio, and this is following a family. And in this world, all of a sudden, crime begins to go rampant, and people are going absolutely wild and killing people and shooting up entire cities and taking down entire cities. And something has put these people completely out of their minds, basically. The family is one of the targets. For whatever reason, they've been put onto people's radars as a target, and they are on the run, hence the title. It sounds like it should be an action-packed kind of read with a lot of kind of spookiness to the what is going on in this world, and kind of being always the target of all of this violence, I think will work well for this prompt. So that's what I'm going to do, and I am hopeful that this is going to be a really quick one to fly through, and I have actually already started it. I am 35% of the way through. I picked it up hoping I'd be able to make it fit a prompt, and in fact I have. So far it is very action-packed. It definitely has the tension going strong. It's not a book that I can really sit and apply logic to, because I want to argue with the characters about what they're doing and some of the reveals that they're figuring out, especially since those reveals are in the synopsis, which I feel like the synopsis was a little spoilery, so I'm not telling you that part. But there were some things that I want to argue with these characters about, but I'm still having a really good time with this book, and I think it's just going to be a fun read. Where we're at now, kind of the action has slowed down a little bit, and so I'm curious where it's going to go from here, and I will be back once I have final thoughts with this one, so we can try to, you know, go the right direction on the board, not keep moving backwards, hopefully. Okay, I do have an update for you, and I have now finished Run by Blake Crouch. And overall, I generally enjoyed this one. It was just a fun, turn your brain off kind of thriller, high action type of story. And overall, I liked it. I think it lost me a little bit as it went on. There was some repetitiveness to the whole hurry up and run type thing, and it's not like a story that I haven't seen done before. It's kind of your typical dystopian world where you get different groups of people. They all turn out to have their own quirks in terms of ways they're not the best. And the whole story behind this murder spree, this rage that's running rampant around the United States, is something that's a little bit fuzzy in terms of the logic, and some of the answers not necessarily coming fully through for me, I didn't think. There are high stakes, which I appreciated. There is was a present danger feeling throughout the book. So all of that worked really well for me. So with that, I went ahead and rolled again. Now we didn't want a 1 particularly because that would take me right back to CEA and T, which I knew was a challenge. And a 3 would take me to the exact same spot I'm on now because I'd go ahead and then go back 3 spaces. So those were both bad, but thankfully we bypassed those. Well, didn't bypass, but we didn't land on either of those. We got right in between them and got Trick or Treat, which means that I needed to pull any prompt I wanted to from the Trick or Treat board, which is kind of the mood reading board where you can just kind of pick which prompts you want. So with that, I decided to go easy on myself and go with the prompt for a repeat author because I really need to pick up New Spring by Robert Jordan. This is a prequel, as I understand it, in the Wheel of Time series, but it's also the book that I need to have finished by next weekend because next weekend is the live show for this one. By the time you're seeing this video, that live show will have already happened, so hopefully I will have finished this well before then, but it is definitely on the TBR to get to. So since I'm going to be listening to that as kind of my commute book next week, I decided I wanted to roll one more time, and again did not want to roll a 1 this time because that would put me again on the move back 3 spaces. So thankfully we went well past that and we got Scary Book. And Scary Book can have multiple interpretations, however you want to interpret it. But because I also went through the corn maze, I need to make sure my book has green and yellow on the cover. And then if I want to pick up a cat, the book would need to have a cat in it. And I think I pulled it off, I think. So the book I'm going for is Honey Witch. And the reason I'm counting this as scary is I've heard some not great things about it. I've heard some good things, but mostly not great. It certainly has plenty of yellow and green going on this cover. I really want to like it because I love the Fairy Loot edition and it's just such a pretty book, but it's also scary because it's romance, it's cozy from what I understand, and those two things don't tend to work super well for me. I also have seen in a few reviews that there is a cat in the book. So I'll find out for sure once I actually start reading it, but that is my understanding. We've got a young woman who is being whisked off to an island to be trained as the next Honey Witch, and this means that no one can fall in love with her, which is fine with her because she's never been interested. And then of course a grumpy skeptic who doesn't believe in magic shows up on her doorstep and romance ensues. I know it's a sapphic romance. That's really all I know going into it. I'm going in with tempered expectations and hopefully maybe I'll surprise myself with it. Who knows? But this will be the other one I'm going to be picking up for TBR Harvest. Back with another update for TBR Harvest, and I did finish the Honey Witch. And going in with very low expectations, I enjoyed this one actually more than I expected to, in the sense that I could pop on the audiobook and just kind of multitask, play some mindless games, get some stuff done around the house, and still follow along in the book. We're following Marigold, who comes from a line of witches, but her mother made the choice to leave her powers behind. Their family has a curse on them where they can either choose their powers or love, and they can't have both. So Marigold's grandmother comes to get her and basically tell her all the things her mother hasn't told her. And Marigold's always been drawn kind of to magic. She's been able to see things that other people can't see. She hasn't really had good experiences with love. It's not necessarily that she's never been interested in it, but she hasn't had a successful relationship that has lasted. So for her, the idea of giving up love to embrace magic and to become the next Honey Witch because her grandmother is ill and nearing the end of her life seems like the right choice for her. So she goes with her grandmother, she trains, she has to take care of the bees. The bees produce honey that they use in their magic, and it is indeed cozy. She has an old friend that she hadn't really thought of in ages, but the second she's back with him. There's a close bond. There's a very skeptical woman who doesn't believe in magic who comes, who piques her romantic interest. And of course, that relationship is going to develop and kind of go against this whole concept of the curse where they can't fall in love. So it was very cozy. The action, the plot, I would say, was pretty predictable. Everyone kind of gets coupled up in the way you expect, and relationships go the way you expect. And I think if you're looking for a cozy, super easy read, then this is one that would work. And for that reason, this one winds up being a 3. It wasn't exactly something that worked perfectly for me, but it also was just so much easier to listen to and just keep listening to than I expected it to be. And I wound up flying through it, and before I knew it, it was already over. Like, I was well past a halfway point update by the time I just decided to keep reading and finishing it. So with that, we get to do one more roll, and it made it very easy on me this time. I don't have to worry about 2 prompts combining because I landed on one of the black cat squares, and that was to find a book with a cat on the cover. And I thought this was going to be a struggle. I thought I was going to have to go to the library and get something. And then I spotted this. This is a book that has been on my TBR for ages, and it's not necessarily my typical type of read, but this is Other People's Houses by Abby Waxman. Abby Waxman is actually one of the very first authors I met after joining Bookstagram. I went to an author event with her. She's a local author, and I find her books to be very cozy in a fun way, easy reads. And if you look super closely, I don't know if it's going to focus enough, there is a cat in that house on the cover. I lucked out with that one. It's perfect for this. It's perfect for Owned October because it's one I've owned for ages and ages. After I enjoyed a couple of her books, I picked up all of her backlist and have been slowly getting to them, but I need to get to this one. In this one, we're following Frances, and she's the carpool mom. She and some of her neighbors developed a carpool with all of their kids, but she really enjoys it and kind of likes doing it. She doesn't have a job to interfere with it, so she just volunteers to do it every day for everyone. Being the carpool mom kind of gets her on the inside of all the neighborhood gossip as well, and when she catches one of her neighbors having an affair, it causes ripples throughout her own life, throughout the neighborhood's life, the carpool's life, and that's all I know. It doesn't sound like a very me book. I don't love affairs in books. I don't love mom fiction per se, but it's Abby Waxman, so I want to give it a shot, and I was able to get the audiobook from the library, so I think it'll be an easy one to kind of multitask to while I'm running reports and stuff at work. So hopefully I will read this and we will get to roll again soon. We're making good progress. Having a bit of deja vu because I'm back standing in front of this camera watching Kylie looking out the window growling at the neighbors, which I'm pretty sure I was doing about 10 hours ago, but I am back because I am now halfway into Other People's Houses, and mixed feelings about this one, to be honest. I think that it's not exactly a perfect fit for my choice in reading. And we've got really messy marriages and relationships. We've got lies, we've got cheating, and none of those things really super draw me in. I think there's not enough to the plot to really keep my attention fully focused. I like our main character, the carpool mom character, in the sense that I can kind of relate in a very abstract way to her. She wants to know what's going on. She wants to be helpful. She wants to be liked. And those things I can understand. But her choices to kind of help her neighbor get away with this affair, I didn't like that decision. And it doesn't even help because by the next day, the husband is finding out. And you know that from the synopsis. So, or at least from the synopsis, you know the husband's going to kick this woman out of the house. And the way that characters are reacting to things and to each other and the relationships, everything's just very messy. And I think just housewife, house husband kind of relationship drama isn't ever going to be a book that's totally for me. I don't feel kind of the connection to the characters in here that I have with most of the Abby Waxman books I've read, and it's just not quite hitting for me with her humor in here as much. And I think it's just because this particular setup isn't really set up for me. I'm not necessarily thinking it's a book I need to put down. I think I'll probably finish it. I'm kind of curious to see what the point of this is going to wind up being, what the final outcome is going to wind up being. And quite honestly, I am exhausted tonight. It is Monday night and I just could quite literally go to sleep, and it's only 6:30. So what I may just do is put this on audio and just kind of veg out and listen, and it might be exactly the type of book that I need tonight, where I can kind of turn my brain off and just listen and be entertained and hang out with Kylie and keep her from barking at the neighbors. So I think that's my plan for tonight, is to go ahead and keep going on this, and then I can find out what I'm reading after this and keep making my way through the corn maze. So I'm really glad to have picked this up. I think it's going to work for several owned October prompts probably. This one was copyrighted in 2018, so it I think will work for a book published before 2020, I think is one of the prompts that I definitely wanted to hit. So it's a book that's been on my shelf for far too long, regardless of if I wind up enjoying it more as it goes or not. I'm glad to have finally checked this off my reading list, and I'll be back and let you know my final thoughts. But I did also want to say that I have now started New Spring by Robert Jordan, and I am already past the 25% mark. This one being so short, it is going to fly compared to so many of his books. I am enjoying it more than the recent books we've been reading, although that doesn't say a lot because the ones we've most recently been reading in this series are the ones known for being rather a slog to get through. But being that it's short, being that I have a good understanding of the world at this point going into it, and being that there's less characters, since this is a backstory of a couple of the characters that we know from the series, all of that, plus the fact that there's no 3-hour prologue in this, there was no prologue at all in this, is making me enjoy it, I think, a bit more. So I am making progress on this one. I know we skipped over kind of the square so I could start this on Monday, and just wanted to share that I did in fact go ahead and start it. So I'm on track to have this done well before the weekend for the live show on Sunday. Good morning. I did exactly as planned and kind of put on the audiobook and turned my brain off, made some dinner, laid in bed, listened to my book, and almost made it to the end of it and crashed really early, so wound up awake really early and finished it this morning. So Other People's Houses is now done. I think this book just purely was a mismatch for me. I think if you like messy neighborhood domestic drama, I think this book will work a lot better, but it just was not my favorite. I really enjoy Abby Waxman's writing in general. I think the characters we got to know pretty well. There just were too many of them. We're following multiple POVs. We kind of have a central character, and her I felt like I got to know better, but we're seeing from so many different POVs, from the children's POVs, from outside characters' POVs, from various people in the neighborhood, and they all have their different dramas, but they're all very domestic, relationship, motherhood type dramas, and that's just not what pulls me in really. So I'm giving this a solid 3-star. It's more me than the book. The enjoyment of it kind of dragged the rating down a bit for me personally, but I'm excited to move on with my board. So I rolled again and I landed on a spot involving food. And this one was a bit of a challenge for me because I really want to get back to more spooky, more seasonal reading after reading something very contemporary, very bright and not so spooky. So I'm stretching the prompt maybe just a bit. And what I'm going for doesn't necessarily relate to food, but it has eat in the title. And I think that's a stretch that I can live with. And the book that I'm going to pick up is All the Hearts You Eat, which is by Haley Piper. And I have a gifted audio arc of this from Blackstone Audio and Libro FM. I know very much nothing about this other than the description really called to me and the title worked for the prompt. And it has what looks like a full cast audio. There are about 5 audio narrators who are named plus a various narrators tag on Libro. So that type of thing definitely encourages me to pick it up. The opening of the synopsis says, a visceral and heartbreaking work of gothic horror about small town mysteries, local folklore, and the things we leave behind when we're gone. It appears we're following Ivory, and she discovers a body on the beach with a mysterious poem, and there's a mystery surrounding how this person died and why they were where they were. So this is what I'm going to be picking up for my next read. We're getting to the point where it is possible I could just have one more roll to escape. That would require rolling a 6, and my luck isn't that good, but I'm not going to be too mad if I have to read 1 or 2 more books. So let's go ahead and read this one, and I'll be back once I have some thoughts to share with you. I'm back with a quick update. I am changing things up a bit. I started All the Hearts You Eat, and it's not working for me. Again, I have this as an audio art, and so I only have the audiobook for it, and I think that's a large part of what's not working for me. The characters are very diverse. There's a lot of them. They have different kinds of relationships with each other, and they have nicknames and all of this. I'm having a really hard time grounding myself into who is who, and I think this is a book that's going to rely heavily on character and identity, so not having that ability to feel like I'm settling into it is a struggle. What also didn't work for me is like chapter 1, we launch into a sex scene. Again, I don't know who these characters are yet, and that is not something I'm generally looking for in my horror reads, is a lot of sex on page, and it is, I think, important when it comes to the identities of these characters. There are a few trans characters, and I think their kind of transitioning is part of the story and part of obviously their identity. And again, there's a lack of me knowing them really well yet and being able to distinguish them in the audiobook. The prose in this is very descriptive, it's very lyrical, and I think it's written well, but again, it's something that maybe makes it slightly harder to just listen and not have the words in front of me on a page when it comes to describing the character and how the timeline of the story is working and everything else. So there's just a lot with this that's not quite clicking for me, and it's long. It is like a 460 page book, so it's not one I want to keep going with if I'm not truly enjoying it at this point. So I'm considering this a softie enough. I will say I read the first 12% of the audiobook, so I did try to stick with it, and there are elements to it in the writing and everything else that I think I could really like, but it's just not something that I want to push myself to get through this long of a book if I'm not connecting with it at the beginning, because that's going to mean the rest of it I'm not going to connect with well. So since I didn't make it too far into this one, I am going to replace it with another book, and it needed to relate to food. So again, not sure how much this book relates to food exactly, but I'm gonna go with Sleep Like Death by Kaylin Bayron, and I believe this one is a Snow White retelling in some way, shape, or form. It says that Eve is ready to be the queen's sword to be her vengeance. So it sounds like potential for female rage type of story, which I like. And there's an apple on the cover. There's an apple kind of important to the Snow White tale, so I'm assuming that's going to come up somewhere in the story. But this one I have physically, and I just got the audiobook from the library, so I have higher hopes for me being able to go ahead and read this quickly and be back with you for more thoughts. It is Friday evening. I'm doing some sprints on my channel and decided to do a bit of an update because I have made progress in 2 of my TBR Harvest books. I've basically finished New Spring. I've got maybe 20 more minutes of this one, but I'm gonna go ahead and sit down now and finish it. The live show for this one will already have happened by the time this vlog goes up, but there will be a whole live show discussion talking about this one, and overall I am enjoying it quite a bit. It's much easier of a read than I'd say most of the books in the series, especially the recent ones, have been, and I think it's because we have a much more limited number of characters that we're directly following, and it's just so gosh darn short for compared to most of the Wheel of Time books. It's been a nice little break between the bigger books, so I am looking forward to having this discussion on Sunday and finishing it up tonight so I don't have to worry about doing it last minute. Since the live show is noon on Sunday for me, I would really like to get this one done. And then then my other update is that I am having much more success with my new food related book. And can't say that there's really any food in the book so much, but I'm still standing by the fact that the apple on the cover makes it work for this prompt. So this one, I know I said had something to do with Snow White retelling. And yeah, it has some of those elements. I don't know that I would have picked them out if I went into this not expecting that. I would say so far really the main element is kind of the mirror and the kind of wickedness that happens tied to that, I guess. But really, I wouldn't go into this personally expecting a Snow White type retelling. We are following Eve, who is a 16-year-old girl. She lives in a world where there is a sorcerer type, someone known as the Knight, who can grant wishes. But they come at a very steep price, and they're very trickster in nature. Things go really, really awry, and the price is steep, even though you're not going to probably get exactly what you wanted out of it. We know early on that one of her mothers enacted one of these deals, and it went very badly, and her other mother, who is the queen, is very adamant that this knight is evil and that people shouldn't be making deals with him, people should know better, and so on and so forth. So Eve is very curious about the knight, and especially having kind of lost her mother to this guy, wants more information, and that could potentially lead her into trouble. It leads her into finding out a lot of secrets about her family, about the people in their town, and so on and so forth. So I'm having a really good time with this one. I think it's not, the best thing I've ever read, but it's a fun read, and I'm glad that I picked it up. And it's really quick. The print, for one thing, it's not super long, and the print in here is really wide spaced, so I am flying through it very quickly. And once I finish New Spring this evening, I will be picking this up probably as my next priority. I do have the audiobook from the library, so anytime I'm wanting an audiobook, this is currently my priority to finish this one up, and then we get to roll again. So I will get back to it and see how it goes. It is now Saturday, so I have updates and a new rule for you. So to start with, I did indeed finish up New Spring on my sprints last night. Did it in one sprint. I was very proud of myself because I did it with 2 minutes to spare. That's about all I have to say that's new on this one, but I did want to confirm that I finished it. And then this morning, I actually finished Sleep Like Death. I was up early and didn't want to actually get up and be productive, so I threw on the audiobook for this one and let it run. And I laid in bed, hung out with Kylie, and listen to the rest of this book. I admit I did have to rewind the last 2 chapters and re-listen to them because I dozed off at some point, but that was me, not the book. Overall, I had a really good time with this one. I thought it was a unique twist on the Snow White narrative, and I think the book itself addresses why this isn't exactly following any sort of exact timeline of Snow White. I did like picking out the different nods to the fairy tale and also the nods to different fairy tales that come up in here as well. I think there was interesting discussion about telling stories. Do I think the characters were as fleshed out as they could have been? No. Do I think the romance necessarily called to me as a romance? Definitely not. I think there could have been more chemistry between the people. I think there could have been more depth in the side characters for sure, but I had a good time with this one. So it winds up being a really high 3.5 for me because my enjoyment was so high, and probably rounding it to a 4 on Goodreads, I think, because it just was a fun time. And quite frankly, I've had a few duds recently, so it was nice to have one that was just entertaining, that just called me to pick it back up, that was quick to binge, and all of that. So with that, we do another roll, and this time if we hit a 6, we'd be out of the corn maze, but of course we did not hit a 6. Instead, we landed on the prompt for witchy vibes, and that's very much something I was excited to land on. And witchy vibes also comes with the final cat that I needed to collect, so the board was taking it easy on me for that one. And where we're at now, we actually could have a pretty decent chance of escaping after this roll, so this could be our final book. But for witchy vibes, I decided to go back to my shelves for something that I've been wanting to get to, and I picked up The Lighthouse Witches by C.J. Cook. And this is an author I have read a couple times before. I really enjoyed, I think it was Haunting in the Arctic. I could have that title a little bit wrong, and I had a lot of fun with that one. And then most recently I read The Book of Witching, which was part of my birds vlog that went up relatively recently. And that one I had a few more mixed feelings, but overall enjoyed it. So this is one that I had heard good things about, and I'm excited to finally be picking it up. I don't remember too much about this. I remember hearing some positive things, and that's why I added it to my list. It says, two sisters go missing on a remote Scottish island. 20 years later, one is found, but she's the same age as when she disappeared. The secrets of witches have reached across the centuries in this chilling gothic thriller. So, I don't know, the two books I've read have kind of dual timelines to them, and I'm guessing we might have that here as well. I don't know. I'm hoping that the historical part, if it is dual timeline, is going to work a little bit better for me in this one. It's not very historical because it looks like we are reading in 1998, which I understand is historical, but I was alive then, so I don't accept it as historical. I was graduating college then, so I don't accept it as historical. But I'm looking forward to reading this one, and I will be back once I have some more thoughts, and talk to you soon. Okay, I am halfway into The Lighthouse Witches, and I'm really enjoying my time with this one. Given that this could well be the last book I need to read to escape the corn maze, I think we could be ending on a very positive note. So this one, I had mentioned, doesn't get super historical, and I was a little bit wrong about that, but there's maybe 3 different timelines I would say in here. We're starting in 1998, and we're following a woman and her 3 children. Liv is the mother, and she is an artist, and she's kind of a struggling single parent. Her husband, who is the father of her 2 youngest and the stepfather of her oldest daughter, has passed away, and she's now trying to make it on her own. And she's taken her children away from their home and moved them to this lighthouse. And it's a really rundown lighthouse. It's kind of flooded. It's a bit decrepit, and the daughters aren't thrilled about this for the most part, especially the oldest, who's kind of a teenage. She's holding some grudges against her mother, and there's a lot of drama happening here. As we know from the synopsis, 2 of those daughters are going to go missing. And then in the more present day, which is 2021, we're following one of those daughters all grown up, and that's Luna. And her 2 sisters went missing. Her mother disappeared on her as well, and she gets a call out of the blue that one of her sisters has been found. This is amazing news. She's thrilled, also nervous, understandably so, what's been going on here. And she goes only to find that her sister Clover is still 7 years old. And this makes no sense. Whether this is really Clover or not, there's a lot of questions. Somehow she winds up getting custody of this girl, even though it doesn't make sense, and I would call that a bit of a convenience in a way. But the mystery of what happened to Clover, what happened to their other sister, is really intriguing. We're finding out things about the past as well, and there's like journal entry type things that are taking us even further into the past. I don't know that it's giving me dates for those past passages. They're just kind of set aside in the text with italics, not so much labeled, but they're part of a grimoire that the oldest daughter, Sapphire, found. And they are talking more about the history of witches tied to this lighthouse. And from the synopsis, it's talking about a cave beneath the lighthouse that used to be used to trap women, to trap witches, and there's a lot of darkness happening. And there's also a lot of lore around the idea of wildlings, which are creatures that can mimic children. And this is something that we're hearing about kind of in the present too, as Luna's trying to figure out how the heck her sisters come back at 7 years old. So there's a lot of darkness, there's a lot of weirdness, and it's 100% keeping me intrigued. I have the gifted audiobook from PRH Audio, and actually this one was gifted to me by the always fantastic Mel at Melanor Reads, so I'm thrilled to be kind of going back and forth with the print when I can sit down and read, and have the audio so I don't have to stop reading when I have to get up and do stuff. So this is having me very intrigued. So I have high hopes for this, and we'll be back once I have more thoughts. Okay, I'm getting ready to get out the door actually spend Saturday running some errands, and then I have a family dinner tonight, but I wanted to give you some updates. And first off, I finished The Lighthouse Witches, and this goes places I did not expect it to. It's very weird, very interesting, and I had a fantastic time with it. I think the author did a good job of kind of balancing the questions about the lore and the superstitions in this place around this lighthouse in this very small community and what they believe is happening when things start going weird, along with characters who are questioning that and asking different questions. We do get a good balance, I think, in the time periods as well, and a lot of good discussions around the relationships of motherhood and children. I don't know if I had mentioned before, but our main character in the present day is pregnant and expecting her first child, in addition to dealing with what went on with her mother and her sisters in the past. And then of course there's also the far back kind of historical perspective that I'm not 100% positive I remember what year it was, but I want to say 1700s maybe, but could be very wrong about that. But I overall had a fantastic time with this one. This is an author that I will for sure be picking up more books from in the future, and this one wound up being a 4-star for me. With that, I did go ahead and do my final roll, because yes, I did roll a high enough number that I have now escaped the corn maze. So that means it is time to go ahead and wrap up this vlog. I had a fantastic time playing with this board game. Thank you very much to Leandra for creating this fun readathon. I was able to collect all 5 of the black cats. I was able to escape, and I had some fantastic reads along the way. Let me know in the comments below, have you been participating in this readathon? How's it going? Have you read any of these books or any of them on your TBR? Let me know all your thoughts, all the things down below, and if you've made it this far and you don't have anything to comment, give me a cat emoji, because that seems appropriate. I would really appreciate it if you can hit that like button below if you enjoyed this vlog, and subscribe if you're interested in more of my readathon